Too bad we can't have lecture outside. It is absolutely gorgeous out there. Okay, so today we're going to finish up the wallet exercise. Can I see your prototypes? Where are your prototypes? Okay, good. And then we're going to start going through some of the initial phases of the EPICS design process and point out some of the tools. The strategy for the next couple of lectures is just to make you aware of what kind of things you might be doing at various points of the design process, because people that are on projects that are at all different stages of the design process. Some of you are still doing project identification. Some of you are trying to get it delivered this semester. So that you're aware of what kinds of resources you might utilize, we'll talk about that. And we'll probably just get through the first one or two phases of the design process. So this week, you should be completing a draft of the individual evaluation rubric to be able to get feedback on that. There is a copy in the OneNote notebooks, but I would caution you not to actually, you can put what things you've done in there, but I would download a copy and keep that and edit it as you go on through the semester. Especially because mid-semester, if you're putting your grades in there, you don't want that to be publicly available to everybody else on your team. So your self-assessment, you probably don't want visible. So you can take the structure from OneNote. The template is also on the website or in SharePoint that you can download the Word document to be able to do that. So the guidelines are in the OneNote, but I would not actually keep what you were completing there after you do that. Also, one of the things your team should be doing is developing that semester plan, because it's already week 4, and what seemed like a really long semester is already starting to tick down. So whatever you think is feasible for being able to complete by the end of the semester. So those are things. Week 5 is typically when we expect websites to be updated by webmasters. So these are the upcoming things. If your advisor or TA aren't giving you feedback on your individual documentation this week, feel free to ask them for that feedback, because it's good to get input sooner than later on how you can do a better job documenting your accomplishments and your learning. Most of the time what I find is that people are doing things, they're just not documenting it well. And we need to be able to respond to the evidence that you provide. Just like when you go into an exam, you can turn in the exam blank and say, I know everything on this exam, but what grade do you think you would get? Probably a 0 or an F, right? So it's the same kind of idea within EPICS. We need evidence of the work and your learning that you've done. All right, so think about that. And we're more than happy to provide feedback on things we've seen you do that you just haven't documented. Okay? All right. So back to your wallet exercise. You each have 4 minutes to share your prototype. Now, before you move, just before you talk, I recommend that you, again, be able to actually hand over your prototype to your partner. Don't try and keep it close to you and show them and defend it. Use this as an opportunity to get feedback. And this diagram here can help you take notes on what things you might want to improve. So go ahead, you each have 4 minutes and I'll tell you when to switch. Go. Yep.
Do we have to do a week 1?
Is there another main pocket for like camp?
If you can. I mean,
I just figured it would go in because it wasn't really specified that we should write because nothing was going on anyway.
okay. But if you want to go back and just recall what you had learned during the first week, you can do that.
Okay.
You know, or maybe what team you were on, or any of those kinds of things.
What if your partner is running late?
Mm.
Because I called him, he's like, he left his wallet back, so he's going
Oh, okay. All right.
Right, so I'll just wait.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead and stop. I saw some great looking prototypes. Good job, those of you who did that. So what did this teach you about design? It's easy? Why is it easy? Think of a concept and do it. Okay. What else? Yes?
Prototyping is actually doable.
Prototyping is actually doable. How many spent 7 minutes or less on their prototype? But what did that elicit, right? What could you learn from a 7-minute prototype? What did somebody learn from one of their prototypes?
You can create something even in like a short amount of time.
Right, you can create something in a short amount of time. Plus, if you've only invested maybe 7 minutes in that, it's a lot easier to be open to changes to it, right? It's frustrating when you've spent hours and hours and hours working on something and you give it to your community partner and they're like, that isn't what I thought I wanted. That's not what I wanted. That's not what I said. So really using these to do this. Now, of course, the prototype should fit the phase. This worked because we were at the initial. Now, if you were getting ready to go into production and you had spent 7 minutes and it was out of paper, probably wouldn't fly very well. And it's not going to be a very good test for maybe usability. But there were certain things that you could use. So think prototyping. Think how you can use this. What were some other things that you learned from this experience, not just sharing your prototype, but even last time? Yes? Start with simplicity. Yes, that's always a good strategy. Sometimes, especially, we tend to make things too complicated. Then it extends the time, the delivery time. So start simple, minimal viable product. Think about that, starting there. And then as you get that done, adding features to it as well. What are some other things? Yes?
You don't need everything that you think you do.
Okay, what do you mean by that? You don't need everything that you think you need or think you do. Okay, right. Sometimes that simplicity actually does that. What was the value of doing multiple interviews? Yes?
You narrowed it down to specifically what that person wanted and not extra. So again, like a simplicity, but it was their simplicity and not things that you could.
Okay, so the multiple interviews allowed you to narrow it down, but you were getting their feedback on it. Yes?
I feel like your ideas get more advanced.
The ideas actually get more refined, too. With the simplicity, it's actually advanced or simplified. And sometimes it grows in appropriate scope, but sometimes you actually find the essence of what is needed versus being distracted by some extraneous things. Yes?
You often thought of questions for the other person while you were designing?
Okay, you thought of questions while you were designing, and that helped when you could go back. So how many of you felt like your partner did a really good job on their design? Really captured it. Okay, what was it that they understood about you that made it good?
It had a lot of spots for cards.
Okay.
You understood that like a modern student has more plastic than cat.
Okay. So the idea here, so understanding you and how you would use it. So that was key to that. So what are some of these big ideas that we're talking about that come from this? What are strategies to use in design thinking? You have ideas? All right, we're going to talk about them if you don't. So, okay, we just did that. So we're going to talk about design thinking or human-centered design as both a process and a mindset. And I might have mentioned this before, but there's actually mindsets that go along with this, ways of thinking, kind of philosophies of how you want to approach that should guide the process that you do with that. There's also things related to process. So I don't know if you've seen, there's lots of design process models out there. You might have encountered them already. If you have an opportunity to work with a company, they're going to maybe have their own design process model that they do. There's this one from environmental engineering construction. Looks more like a spiral there. There are design process models from Germany that have like 100 steps, related to them. So there's a lot of variations. There's not a particular design process model, but they really capture, there's at least some philosophies that I think underlie the process that we use, which is the EPICS design process. So show, don't tell. Actually having the visual diagrams and or the prototypes really facilitate better knowledge exchange and getting feedback from your users. Because it's easy to talk about something, and then when you actually show it, that actually will allow you to get the feedback you need. Focusing on the human values. So beginning your interviews and understanding what your user needed allowed you to be able to design something that met their needs. So start with empathy. Clarity, again, that simplicity or being clear about what it is you're trying to do and not trying to do too much. Those are the things that become important and are underlying values in design thinking. Embrace experimentation. So actually trying multiple strategies is actually really effective. I would really recommend that design teams keep 3 designs at least through conceptual until you want to narrow it. There's a tendency for novice designers to refine too quickly and not allowing it to stay ambiguous as long as possible. So you can, if most major design teams will actually keep probably 1 to 3 multiple designs going on at the same time to be able to allow that. And using prototyping, proof of concept, to help you gather information. I always get a little concerned when I hear somebody say, well, I thought something about a design, especially when we're designing for someone else. So what other information can you do besides what you just think? Can you get evidence? I've shown experimentally that this will work. I've gathered data from my user and observe them do it, interact with the prototype, and these were the areas they had problems. That is data. What you think about it probably is not relevant when you're designing for someone else. Be mindful of the process. There are certain strategies that are more appropriate at different phases of the design process than others. When you're getting ready to deliver, it is not necessarily the time to brainstorm 5 different other ways that you can implement that. That's not the right thing. So there are times where you're going to be expanding, doing divergent kinds of thinking, and then strategies for convergent. There are processes, tasks that are more appropriate at different phases. So just kind of being aware of those. It's really will help you be more effective. Bias towards action, and I think I heard that discussed here as well. As far as it's better to do, so if you think you have an idea, actually implement it. Again, that thinking kind of trap we can get into. Sometimes there's way too much thinking and design thinking and not using prototypes and action and experimentation to actually verify whether or not something is going to be effective. Radical collaboration, this is really is kind of what EPICS can be about. In some kind of situations, there tends to be not pulling in different perspectives. But really, this is a time to value, embrace different perspectives of your teammates. There is not a single expertise that will be effective in getting any project if you only have a single expertise through the whole design process and out the door. So being aware and valuing what other disciplines can do. Some of you guys have students from interaction design on your teams. Some have those from entrepreneurship. Embracing the different perspectives that everybody brings to the design process and to the team, and using that to do the best thing that we can do for our community partner. So the other issue there that I think it's part of the experimentation, but the word iteration is really an important word in design. Iteration is key throughout the design process. So the interviews that we did before, part of the benefit of going back was iterating. Part of the ideas of generating some solutions, getting feedback, the 5 sketches you did, then getting feedback and coming up with another one, that's iteration. So using iteration to refine, understand better. Design is difficult. From a cognitive point of view, it's one of the most difficult cognitive tasks that we can do is if you look at a taxonomy of problem solving. We're also encountering probably problems that are more complex and ill-defined. A lot of probably the work that you've done so far and a lot of homework probably in your other classes, there's one right answer, there's givens that are there, and the strategy to solve it is in the chapter preceding in the book, right? You don't have to look elsewhere. The problems we're solving in EPICS and the problems that are solved in the real world for design, they're complex. They're not solved with just give only known information like in the chapter preceding. There's not one right answer often. There could be multiple solutions. Some of them may be more optimal than others, but it's getting away from that mindset that there's only one way of doing this. And so really, but that gets to be difficult. We can only manage so many things in our brain at one time. So part of why we have a design process and the tools that we do are to help offload some of the cognitive so that you can do the design with this. So, yeah. Okay. The other part I talked about is this need to do divergent thinking and convergent thinking throughout. And sometimes it's hard to switch. You might be somebody who's usually the brainstormer on the team, and you can leverage that, but there are times where you have to make a decision. And so being able to do convergent, choose between different options. But again, this is what makes design difficult, having to engage both in divergent and convergent thinking throughout the process. So I put this up here early because I wanted you to know that there's a set of resources that are available. So you can look at the EPICS design process document, and there's strategies, how to do a DFMEA, sample interview questions, personas. There are a bunch of different aspects with that. Also, a great set of tools is compiled by IDEO, which is an international design firm, and also Stanford D School. So the wallet exercise is from Stanford D School, and so they also have like the last page where you could capture notes about the prototype. they have other guidelines that you can use at different points of the design process. I know when one of the teams was getting ready to go to Riley Hospital, we pulled up the Stanford D School interview questions to remind us what things we might want to ask when we go down there. So they're great tools to do that. There's also a really good website on inclusive design. And I'll show a little bit more about these later. But if you're in the midst of design and are looking for tools to assist, I wanted you to have these resources here. So this is the EPICS design process. What do you think? So it's graphically intended to represent different things, or some of the philosophies. What kind of philosophies or what things do you see about the EPICS design process here? What does it suggest to you? Yes? Always keeping stakeholders in mind. And when we talk about stakeholders, we're talking about the broad set of users. Sometimes that word gets associated with the person who's paying for it. That's not how our limited way in which we're looking at this. So the users. So if you're doing a design for kids with disabilities, the kids, the teachers, the parents, all those broad things around that. What else? Yes?
Iteration.
Iteration, right. So there's iteration around the outside, maybe needing to go back, but then there's iteration with our stakeholders throughout. Anything else? Yes?
The only time you stop completing the project is when you retire.
Yeah, the only time you're actually done with it is actually when you retire. That's right. So some of your teams have had to bring back and do some maintenance on some of the projects. That's our responsibility since we're in partnership with our community partners to do that. And so, you might even go around this twice if you're thinking, I want to deliver version 1.0, minimal viable product, get it out to my stakeholders, my project partner, let them use it, and then I can refine it, add more detail as needed. So we're going to talk about some of the steps. They're listed in the middle, and those are strategies that you can use throughout the design process. So the first phase is actually recognizing and realizing whether or not, what is the project that we're working on. And again, as a reminder, each one of these phases has a goal associated with it, suggested task that you might do, and then a gate. This is to say you should move on to the next phase. So some of you are in kind of this needs an assessment to determine what is it the project it is that we're going to work on for our community partner. Maybe you just delivered a project, maybe it's a new partnership, but you can be a part of this. This level of looking at this really is at a pretty high level. This is not getting fully specified, but it's to understand that you have a need, or your community partner has a need, and that the EPICS team, it's a good match for us to actually start to begin to look at it. So just, is there an appropriate project that meets a compelling need? One of the main strategies of the needs assessment is to understand the gap between what is currently available and what they would like. And your project partner may talk about that. Right now, we're only able to accommodate a certain number of kids. Or right now, we want a display that's going to teach about energy. That might be a broad statement that between what is currently there and what is needed. So sometimes one way of